Hi, my third grade friends. Mrs. Real here with another installment of Samantha Spinner and the Super Secret Plans. When last we left Samantha and Nipper, they were, sorry guys, my windows are open. They were on an adventure. Their parents were gone for the day. They'd found the map inside the umbrella. They had found the mailbox at the end of their street that lifted up, and they went down the staircase into the tunnels. And when they got down into the tunnels, there were 9 openings going different directions. And as they got used to being down there in the dark, there was some words chiseled over each arch in huge letters. And they said, Dynamite, Paris, Baraboo, Duck, Zizix, Edfu, Wagga Wagga, Wahoo, and Exit. And Samantha remembered one trip they had taken with their family where they picked up Uncle Paul in the place called Dynamite, which was where the tunnels were. And they picked up Uncle Paul, who was visiting a flea market, and Samantha asked her uncle what kind of flea market would set up in the middle of nowhere. No place is the middle of nowhere, he answered. And then, of course, that's when Nipper was kicking her in the shins, and they didn't get to finish that. So she said, I think these really are locations, she told Nipper. Then we are definitely going to Wahoo, he said with certainty. That sounds like the kind of place where... No, Samantha said firmly. It's my umbrella, and we are going to Paris. So I'll share the screen. I'll put the book down. You can read along if you'd like. Or just sit back and listen. I'm also going to start a timer because you know me, I could read all afternoon, although my eyes have been bothering me a lot lately from reading in this dark room, which is why I've got my blinds open a little bit more in the back to see if that helps so I can see what I'm doing better. And here we go. Chapter 9 is called Charge. Samantha and Nipper stepped through the Paris archway and walked along the corridor. There was enough light for them to see their feet, but not much more. She guessed from the sound of their footsteps that they were probably walking on a tiled floor. As she walked, she looked up and squinted, trying to make out what the ceiling above them looked like. Then Nipper whacked her with an outstretched arm, and she stopped. Look down, he said. They'd reached a ledge. Light filtered down through a grate in the ceiling so she could make out the details below. About 3 feet down from the ledge, 2 wide metal tracks led off into the distance and disappeared into the darkness. And on the tracks, directly below Samantha and Nipper, sat a small open car. The strange vehicle looked like something that belonged on a roller coaster. Mag train, said Nipper. Samantha thought again about their family trip to Pacific Pandemonium. The visit had been cut short after Nipper insisted that Samantha sit next to him on the Holy Cowabunga roller coaster over and over again. After 4 times around the winding, flipping, twisting track, Samantha had had enough and got off. Nipper stayed on and rode the Holy Cowabunga 9 more times. Then he barfed mightily, and the staff had to close the attraction while they cleaned out the car. The Spinners left the park right after that. Everyone in the family was extremely grouchy that their trip to the amusement park was cut short. But Samantha remembered having fun the whole ride home, guessing license plate messages with Uncle Paul. CLWNC 4R, she said, reading the plate on a tiny red sedan in front of them. Clown car, Uncle Paul answered quickly. A van sped past them. As it went by, they saw LVFR4NC3 on the plate. Love France, she called out. Or leave France, her uncle said thoughtfully. Looking down at the mag train car, Samantha guessed it was about the same size as the one they rode on the Holy Cowabunga, but it looked old, even for a roller coaster car. There were benches wide enough for 2 riders in the front and in the back. They were connected by a single bucket seat in the middle, so there was room for a total of 5 passengers. Viewed from the top, the car was shaped like a big letter H. Shotgun, shouted Nipper as he bolted ahead of Samantha, hopped over the ledge, and plopped onto the right side of the front bench. He rapped his knuckles against the wide, curved windshield that stretched across the front of the car. Then he waved, signaling her to join him. Samantha was never, ever going to sit next to her brother on any ride again if she could help it. She hopped down from the ledge. Then she took a big step forward and lowered herself into the bucket seat in the center of the H. They both sat for a minute, looking around and waiting for something to happen. Samantha noticed a glowing red oval button on the back of the bench in front of her. She reached out and pressed it. The button clicked down, and a soft hum began to fill the air. The oval turned yellow, and numbers and letters appeared across its front. 00000 mph, miles per hour. The tiny hairs on her arms stood up, and from where she sat, Samantha could see the tracks begin to glow. They bathed the chamber all around them with soft orange light. In front of her, Nipper's hair stuck out in all directions. Illuminated by the glowing tracks, his head looked like a porcupine. She could feel the hair on her head sticking out too. Electric, said Nipper. The hum grew louder and the car began to move forward. Samantha quickly stowed the umbrella in a narrow space below her feet and gripped the sides of her seat. She prepared herself for a roller coaster ride. But there was no jolt of G-force. The car began to speed up, slowly and incredibly smoothly. Samantha looked down at the oval. The numbers were rising, and they were already moving pretty fast. 3 miles per hour, 8 miles per hour, 90 miles per hour. Magnetic, said Nipper. Samantha kept her eyes on the oval and watched the numbers advance. She could feel the car continuing to accelerate. Suddenly, Samantha understood the word magtrain. They were floating above the tracks, propelled by magnets. The rails beneath the train now glowed bright yellow, so Samantha could clearly see the walls around her and Nipper, and that they were racing past them very quickly. The numbers in the center of the oval kept shooting upward. 140 miles per hour, 308 miles per hour, 912 miles per hour, 1,200 miles per hour. Fantastic, Nipper shouted. He turned to look back at her and carefully stood up from the bench. The air blasting over the windshield whipped his hair around wildly. She smiled at her brother. This was pretty fun. A card of some sort slipped out of Nipper's pocket and was caught by the rushing air. Samantha and Nipper both followed its fluttering path onto the tracks and watched it vanish into the long tunnel behind them. Sam! Nipper shouted. I lost my old baseball card! Samantha shook her head but didn't say anything. He was going to lose that card sooner or later. Nipper's not very good at holding on to things, is he? The walls narrowed and Nipper sat back down. The car was moving faster and faster. They rocketed smoothly down an endless tunnel. The rails were now bright white. Samantha glanced at the yellow oval. 10,000 miles per hour. We've stopped accelerating, she called. It's about 5,000 miles from Seattle to Paris, she added. We should be there in 30 minutes. That depends, her brother shouted. Which way around the earth are we going? Samantha had to admit that it wasn't a completely ridiculous question. It was one she might have been able to answer if she'd noted which way they were pointing when they took off below the surface of the planet. But it had been hard to see much of anything in that little round station room. They probably missed a lot of details there. The mag train coasted on and on and on. Considering how fast they were going, the ride was pretty comfortable. As they raced through the tunnel, Samantha took out her little black journal and opened it to the most recent entry. Yesterday, she was planning to add to it. Then Nipper interrupted her, and they'd discovered the plans. She reread the sad sentences. There's a little bit of Nellie McPepper hidden inside of all of us. It's a tiny egg of sadness waiting to hatch into a giant chicken of woe. The sky is gloomy and gray because the sun has been jacked up on a massive flatbed truck rolling south. We stand soaking in the dreary drizzle each rainy day, clueless fools in a crummy, cruel world. We have nothing to do and nowhere to go. Samantha could hear the motors of the mag train car purring like a giant electronic cat. She scratched out the gloomy lines and started over. There is a hidden mag train station in Seattle, Washington. It is located near Volunteer Park, about 2 miles from downtown. So, 10,000 miles an hour on a mag train from Seattle, Washington to Paris, France, in about half an hour. That would be awesome. So, chapter 10, baguette me not. Kind of like forget me not, but baguette is French, a French bread, loaf of bread. Samantha looked up from her journal. The mag train had come to a stop. It happened so smoothly that she hadn't noticed. Nipper was already standing on the platform outside the car, waving at her impatiently. Come on, Sam, let's go, let's go. She put away her notebook. Then she grabbed the umbrella and climbed out onto the platform next to her brother. The rails under the mag train car still softly glowed orange, dimly lighting their surroundings. They were in a square chamber. The floor was paved with large stone tiles of different geometric shapes. Samantha had a feeling they were still underground. "Mental note," she said to Nipper. She tapped her forehead. "Next time, we bring a flashlight." "Yes, you two," he responded, imitating their father, "and make sure it's a high candle power light source." "With just the right color balance," Samantha added. She gazed around the room. Behind them was the mouth of the train tunnel, but there didn't seem to be any other exits. Nipper watched her. "I looked everywhere while you were still writing," he said. "I can't find any way out of here." "Let's check the plans," said Samantha. She swung the umbrella from over her shoulder and pressed the latch on the handle with her thumb. The red octagon burst open above her head. "Magnifier, please," she said, extending her free hand toward her brother. Samantha turned the open umbrella upside down and carefully placed it on the tiles, then crouched over it. Squinting in the dim light, she scanned the lining. She found the mailbox and the Space Needle. She picked a dotted line and followed it until it reached a shape that looked like a bunny, or maybe a rat. That clearly wasn't Paris or France. She started over and followed a line until it reached a little drawing of a circus tent. There was nothing that seemed French or Parisian about it. She went back to the Space Needle and picked another line. She followed a new dotted line with her finger and traced a long path to one edge of the umbrella. The line stopped at a shape she thought she recognized. "France?" she asked herself out loud. Then she noticed that right beside it was a little drawing she recognized for sure, the Eiffel Tower. "France," she answered herself out loud. Inside the France shape was a square. Inside the square was a drawing of a shoe. On the shoe was a number 4. Nipper leaned in and looked at the drawing. Then, puzzled, he looked at Samantha. Samantha closed the umbrella and gazed at the floor. In the dim light, the tiled surface was a jumble of gray and black shapes, triangles, rectangles, hexagons, and aha! About 5 feet from where she stood, she spotted a lone square. She walked forward and stopped in the center of the tile. "Stand here with me," she told Nipper. He skipped over and hopped into the square. He bumped into his sister and she glared at him. He shifted a few inches away from her, but he stayed within the square. "Okay, now what?" he asked. Samantha thought about the drawing on the umbrella, the square, the shoe, and the number 4. This one was easy. 1, 2, 3, 4, she counted, stomping her feet each time. There was a scraping noise overhead and a bright shaft of light enveloped them. A square hole had opened in the ceiling. As if powered by a huge spring, the tile they were standing on launched upward. Samantha and Nipper reached toward each other and took hold. They hugged as the tile shot up toward the opening. With a loud click, the tile fit into the square hole, and they were outside. They let go of each other immediately. Then they looked around. Samantha and Nipper stood on one of 1,000 stone tiles that made up a vast plaza. Around them, crowds of people milled about. Some of them wore matching t-shirts. Others had big, bulky backpacks. They were tourists from all over the world, chatting to each other in a dozen different languages. They snapped pictures of themselves, each other, and the glass pyramid that towered 20 feet over the courtyard. A person dressed as a circus clown stood in a clearing, performing tricks for the passing tourists. "I know this place," said Samantha. "We're outside France's most famous museum. That pyramid is the entrance to the Louvre." "Did you say Louvre?" "No, it's Louvre," Samantha said in slow, careful French. "It has some of the greatest treasures of the art world inside, including the Mona Lisa by Leonardo da Vinci." "How do you know that?" asked Nipper. "Uncle Paul told me about it," said Samantha. "You were there too, but maybe you weren't listening carefully like I was." She thought about her missing uncle for a moment. "Actually, he mentioned this place a bunch of times," she said slowly. Nipper wasn't listening carefully to her either at the moment. He was looking around the crowded plaza. "Sam," he said, "nobody noticed us. We just popped out of a hole in the ground, and no one cares at all." Samantha looked around too. "Well, people don't always notice amazing things right in front of their noses," she said. "Other stuff seems important, so they forget to take a closer look at..." Hold on, said Nipper. There's something in front of my nose right now. Something that smells great. And I'm hungry. Samantha sniffed twice and nodded in agreement. Something did smell wonderful. Nipper began to push his way across the crowded plaza, following the scent. Samantha walked quickly after him, weaving around people. She followed her brother to a low stone wall that appeared to surround the plaza, then through a break in it. On the sidewalk a few yards away, a man stood beside a bright yellow food cart. The front half of the vehicle was a rectangular box, balanced on two wheels. The back half was a bicycle. A metal rack rose from the front, supporting a red and white striped awning. A dozen loaves of bread lined the shelves of the box. Some were long and thin, and others were wide. They smelled absolutely delicious. Samantha caught up with Nipper and approached the man. He was wearing jeans, a black t-shirt, and a yellow apron. Stenciled on the sides of the cart and on his apron were large letters, Pain de jour. Nipper waved at him, then sniffed the air dramatically and shook his head from side to side. Then he did it 5 more times. It reminded Samantha of Dennis. As soon as Nipper had the man's attention, he called out cheerfully, "Sir, we don't want any pain, but could you give us some of that great bread?" The man stared at him for a moment. Then he smiled. "Not pain. It's pronounced pain. That is the French word for bread," he explained in English, with a bit of a French accent. Samantha glared at Nipper, but didn't say anything. She wasn't sure if goofball kid brothers were as common in France as they were in the United States of America. Nipper kept going. "Mr. Pawn, or may I call you Peter? I'd like your freshest jumbo breadstick." He gestured towards Samantha. "My personal assistant will handle the finances." "It is a baguette," said the vendor patiently. He grabbed one of the vertical loaves and slid it into a paper sleeve. Then he turned and held it out to Samantha. "Please pay €2 for your boss, young personal assistant lady." There were so many things wrong with this exchange between her brother and the vendor that Samantha was speechless, and unfortunately, euroless. She shrugged and held up both hands, palms up, to indicate that she had no money. Then she remembered that she did have some of the loose change from her desk. She quickly fished around in her pockets and came up with 2 quarters. Sheepishly, she presented them to the vendor. Uncle Paul had taught her to say 3 things in 11 languages. The first thing was please. "S'il vous plaît," she said carefully. A look of disappointment washed over the man's face. He pulled the baguette away and put it back on display. He turned and opened a side door of the cart. He fumbled around inside for a moment and produced a different loaf of bread. It was already wrapped in paper. "My $50 special for 2 special customers," he said. He handed the baguette to Samantha with one hand while taking the 2 quarters with the other. Samantha eyed the delicious-smelling baguette on the shelf as she examined the special bread. She unwrapped and examined it quickly. It felt a little hard and it didn't smell very fresh. "When did you bake this?" she asked. "Why, it was baked in the morning," said the man, sounding insulted. "Which morning?" Samantha pressed. Meanwhile, Nipper noticed a new scent. It was quite different from the aroma of freshly baked bread, and it was absolutely not delicious. It smelled like old banana peels, melted crayons, and sweaty sneakers left in a backpack for a month. "This is definitely not a freshly baked baguette," Samantha continued, arguing with the street vendor. As she spoke, she waved the bread in the air. Nipper, nose twitching, was watching his sister when something flashed through the air and thwack hit the baguette. It sliced into the bread, coming to a stop halfway through the narrow loaf. If it had actually been a freshly baked baguette, the sharp object would have sliced all the way through a light and flaky crust and out the other side. It would have continued in a straight line until it hit Samantha right between the eyes, and that would have been the end of this story. Fortunately, it had been 57 hours since the baker removed the special baguette from his oven and let it cool. For that reason, the flying object remained lodged in the stale French bread. There's that little object right there. "What's this?" asked Samantha, pulling the metal object from the bread and holding it up. It flashed silver in the light. "It's a shuriken," gasped Nipper, "a ninja throwing star." The flat, shiny object was indeed shaped like a star, about 3 inches across. It had 8 needle-sharp points. The outline of a crown and 2 crossed swords were engraved in the center. Samantha puzzled over the weapon and its engraving for a second. Then she slid it carefully into the front pocket of her pants. Thwack! Bang! A second flying blade whizzed at her and hit the bread, and a third sailed past Samantha's neck and slammed into the side of the bakery cart. Alarmed, the vendor hopped onto his bicycle and began to pedal away. Nipper grabbed a thick round loaf off the back of the cart as the man departed, and he whirled around, holding the loaf in front of his face for protection. Thunk, thunk. Sorry guys, different timer. The round loaves were heavier and thicker than baguettes. Just in time, Nipper's bread stopped 2 metal stars from hitting his face. Sam, we're under attack, he shouted to his sister. The food cart was gone, and they had walked too far from the Louvre Plaza to call for help. They were alone on the sidewalk, with nowhere to hide. Halfway down the block, a hooded figure clad all in black tiptoed toward them. He may have thought that he was being sneaky, but his horrible smell gave him away. With nothing but bread to defend themselves, the Spinners stood and faced the approaching menace. I can't stop there. We need another chapter. Chapter 11, Hit the Road, Jerk. Samantha and Nipper had no formal martial arts training, but they had almost 10,000 hours of pillow fighting experience between them. They had no idea why they were under attack, but they were not going down without a fight. As the man drew close, they could see that he was indeed some kind of ninja. At least he was dressed like one. He wore a black hood that covered his entire face, except for the narrowest slit where his eyes peeked through. He had on a long black coat and baggy black pants that drew tight around his shins, revealing black socks and black split-toed ninja slippers. And he was smeared with garbage. Or that's what it looked like. Brown and green splotches covered his shirt and coat. A yellowish stripe ran down his left thigh. It looked like a bird had recently pooped on his right shoulder. He moved swiftly and silently, but his smell screamed out loudly. In seconds, he was within a few feet of the kids. Then he stopped. Where did you get that umbrella? He demanded. There are 20 ninjas in the United States right now looking for... Nipper sprang forward. He moved quickly and maneuvered himself directly behind the shrouded man. Then, holding tight to his loaf of bread, he swung at the ninja's back with all his might. There was a loud thwack. The bread struck something flat and hard beneath the ninja's shirt. It fell to Nipper almost like he'd hit a plank of wood. In a flash, the ninja turned, drawing a long silver sword from a sheath at his side. Even faster than Nipper had launched himself, the ninja diced the bread into tiny cubes that dropped to the sidewalk. Before Nipper could react, the ninja raised one of his smelly feet and kicked him in the center of his chest, knocking him backward onto the bread cube-sprinkled pavement. Samantha stepped between Nipper and their attacker. Defiantly, she held up the throwing star-studded baguette in one hand. In the other, she grasped the metal tip of the umbrella and pointed the wooden handle at him. I've heard that Parisians aren't friendly to visitors, she said, but this is ridiculous. Yeah, said Nipper, scrambling back to his feet. France isn't making a good first impression. I don't care about France, the ninja muttered. His accent might have been British. It was hard to tell as it was coming through the filthy face mask. It clearly wasn't a French accent. He shifted his body, adjusting whatever it was that he was concealing inside his shirt. Then he lifted his sword and waved it at Samantha. Hand it over, he told her. You don't want this bread, said Samantha. It's stale, and it's full of metal blades. No, said the man in black much louder. The umbrella. You forgot to say s'il vous plaît, said Samantha. I don't speak French, said the ninja. Now let me have it. Samantha was happy to let him have it. She gathered her strength and brought the umbrella down on his head as hard as she could. Wham! The man let go of his sword and fell face first onto the pavement, knocked out cold. Nipper bent down and rapped his knuckles on the center of the unconscious ninja's back. It was like knocking on a door. He started to reach for the ninja's sword, but Samantha grabbed his shoulder. Leave it, she said. The handle's gross and sticky, and we've got to get out of here now. Nipper looked back at the grimy man and his grimy weapon and nodded in agreement. Then he and his sister ran. They retraced their path along the sidewalk and through the break in the stone wall and headed into the crowded Louvre Plaza. They pushed their way through the tourists, searching for the spot on the ground where they'd emerged. Just as they were about to reach the huge glass pyramid, they stopped short. Two ninjas stood side by side in their path, and it looked like they were on the very tile that had lifted Samantha and her brother from the mag train chamber. The two black-clad figures didn't notice the kids. They were busy studying the tile beneath their feet. They knew it wasn't just an ordinary part of the plaza. They were clearly trying to figure out how to make it do something. They found the square, said Nipper, but I don't think they know about the secret stomp. Samantha glanced sideways to make sure that she still had the umbrella on her shoulder. Then she grabbed her brother's hand and they ran through the crowd and away from the Louvre. They turned to their right and ran to the closest point of the low stone wall that surrounded the plaza. They hopped over it and sat down on the grass out of sight. I think I saw another way out of here, Samantha said, catching her breath. She popped open the umbrella and Nipper handed her the magnifying glass. Right here, she said, pointing at the drawing of the Eiffel Tower centered in the lens. I think there's some kind of connection from here to Italy. There was a tiny arrow beside the lowest landing of the Eiffel Tower, just above the arch that forms the legs. Above the arrow, tiny dots were arranged in a cluster that looked like the letter R. A line started there and ran halfway across the umbrella. Unlike the dotted mag train line that ran from Seattle to France, this line was a chain of little spirals. It looked to Samantha like a gust of wind. The line ended at a picture that was definitely the boot-shaped country, Italy. There must be a lot of ways to get around using the plans, Samantha said. Now let's go find that boot. I mean, those dots, she said, or that letter R, or an arrow, or, I get it, Sam, Nipper cut her off. Let's go check out the tower. They hopped back over the wall and quickly headed away from the plaza. They ran down a narrow street lined with restaurants and small hotels and didn't stop until they came to a gloomy-looking woman standing next to a table and chairs outside a cafe. Samantha had remembered that the Eiffel Tower was Paris's tallest building, so she was ready with the second thing Paul had taught her to say in French. Where is the tallest building in Paris? It says it here in French. I don't speak French. I can do Spanish, okay. The woman's expression brightened instantly. La Tower Eiffel, she exclaimed and pointed down the street. She gestured with a curved hand to show that they should follow the bend in the road ahead. Samantha said, Merci. That was the third and final thing she knew how to say in French. Thank you. She and Nipper ran down the street, and as they rounded the curve, they saw the banks of the River Seine. Off in the distance, the Eiffel Tower came into view. So here's information about the Louvre. The Louvre is an immense, sprawling palace in Paris, France. It displays 35,000 works of art and houses hundreds of thousands more. It is one of the world's largest museums. It was originally a fortress and then a royal palace. For more than 200 years, it has been France's great public art museum. The Louvre has expanded many times. Today, its most prominent feature is a giant glass pyramid surrounded on three sides by different wings of the building. Each year, almost 10 million visitors come to see Leonardo da Vinci's Mona Lisa and countless other works of art. What they don't know is a secret transit station is located directly beneath the Louvre. Look for a square tile about 10 feet from the entrance to the giant glass pyramid. It is much larger than the thousands of other squares that pave the plaza, and big enough for up to 4 adults to stand on. While you're in the center of the tile, stomp your feet 4 times. The tile will descend quickly, coming to a stop in the entrance chamber to the Paris Mag train station. A new tile will slide into place above your head. To return to the surface, stamp 4 times again. The tile will rise and slide back into place. Chances are, no one will notice as you emerge into the museum's courtyard, which is exactly what Samantha and Nipper had done. So they've had quite the excitement in Paris, and are trying to get out, but they can't get back home the same way they came in, so now they're finding a different way, and they're going to end up in Italy, which is a fabulous place to end up. Can't wait to see what else is going to happen with all of the excitement. See you next time. Soon, I promise.